My name is Amanda Reil, and I am one of the senior career coaches at the Career and Advising Center on campus. And I am joined by Olivia Scott,
the other senior career coach in the Career and Advising Center on campus. So we are very excited to be here today and chat with you and roll into the fall semester. We love talking about transferable skills, and you'll probably see that.
Yes, and with those questions and discussion, to reiterate from before, you're welcome to unmute yourselves to ask a question as we go, or please do utilize the chat function as well. And Olivia is going to be there to kind of help me to keep an eye on that while I present. And yeah, we'll just kind of get it kicked off here. This takes me a moment to figure out my slide transitions. So just wanted to go over some of the objectives or what you can expect to go over here today, which should be fairly consistent with what you read on CareerLink or on my NDSU GPS Academy as well. We're going to define transferable skills, talking about what these actually are and why they're even being brought up. Determine where and how you can develop these skills further, expanding upon the skills you already have, and then how to articulate the value that you bring to the table to be able to speak to an employer or provide some written communication on how you are demonstrating these skill sets that are more transferable and less specific to the job itself. So what's in a name? This is where I'd maybe invite some engagement early on. What is a skill? Anybody have an idea on how you would define a skill? And you are probably not wrong.
And also feel free to throw it in the chat. And if you want it to be private, send it to me and I'll read it out and I won't attach any names to it.
So I see it's an ability that can be improved with practice. Yes, can be improved. Some people choose not to, because basically a skill is anything that you can do. So a good example of that would be on a very elementary level, tying your shoe. That in and of itself is a skill. Just like has been noted in the chat, it can be improved upon there too. I think there are probably some people out there who never choose to learn to tie their shoes. Their prerogative. And then kind of taking that definition to the next step or the next tier here is what is transferable about transferable skills, or how will you know that a skill is transferable? I also see something came through the chat as well, that a skill is something that can be learned, but not anybody has those. Not everybody has the same skills, that is for sure, yeah. And then a comment on the transferable skills is that it's from one field of application to another, definitely. So literally can be transferred or carried over from one work involvement, volunteer experience, engagement of any kind, and can be then related to in this instance, a career field or a specific job. Any other feedback or comments on transferable skills, or how we will know where those skills may be transferred to? All right, well then I'm gonna just keep moving on with that. So how we will know where it transferred to, that's something that we're gonna dig into a bit further here in just a bit, but let's say someone provides you a list of skills. How would you know if it's actually something that's relevant or pertinent to the future world of work that you intend to have? And Olivia, help me out if there's another way of phrasing some of these questions to make them more clear or hopefully encourage more engagement.
Well, I might answer that one first. If I was looking at a position description and I saw that they are looking for a technical skill that I use in my job, I'd know that it transfers from my job to that job that I would be doing with them.
Yes, exactly that. It could be in a job description. It could be just in conversation you have with an employer that's in the industry of interest, where they say, you know, one of the main things that really lacks for our, you know, entry-level positions is that these folks don't always come in with organization. You can practice organization today, yesterday, 10 years ago, and forever and ever. So many different ways to learn which skills are transferable for you. So what are you good at? This is, again, just a very elementary kind of example as far as kind of assessing where you are with your skill levels. So how do you know if you are a good or a bad driver? Who tells you, or what are the signs? Anybody care to share how they know if they are a good or a bad driver? And I'm sure you're all sitting there thinking, wow, this better get more in depth than this. It's going to.
Comment did just come in saying how many mistakes you make while driving. And I was just going to say too, I know I'm a good driver because I've never been in an accident.
There you go. Yep. Another individual has said comments from family members. Yeah, who doesn't have my mom is that classic passenger seat driver. Level of confidence while driving. That's another good one too. Yes. So I've got a good example of that myself. Well, not myself, but the example we provide with this presentation is if you see the flashing red, blue, white, whatever color they are, lights in the review mirror, that's usually also a pretty good indicator as well that you maybe are doing something wrong or not the most skilled in that area. And I think the common trend that we're seeing with the comments and what Olivia shared and the flashing lights in the review mirror is that they're all forms and versions of feedback. So the best way to learn if you are skilled or as skillful in an area as you ought to be for a future career or a future industry is by seeking feedback. I was in a presentation recently where we were discussing how everybody gives and receives feedback in a different way. And all of that is about how you communicate, kind of doing those check-ins with who might be a supervisor or someone you're working with, a mentor, a faculty member you're working with, and being receptive to what it is they're telling you. So feedback can always go one of two ways. It can go well if you take it well and try to improve upon it, or if you get disgruntled and angry about the feedback you've gotten, that's not the direction you want to take it, because then it's no longer a growing professional development opportunity. Any thoughts or questions so far?
Looks like none.
Awesome.
Sorry, I just joined now, so I just 10 minutes late to the meeting.
No problem at all. We are going to, the presentation is currently being recorded, so I will be sending it out at the end as well. But of course, as we're going, if it feels like there's something that you're missing out on, please do interrupt us or put the brakes on, and feel free to ask questions as they come up.
Okay, ma'am. Yep, thank you.
Not a problem. So for those of you who registered, and I'm sure pretty much everybody did, you should have gotten an email here about an hour or so ago that had a worksheet included in it. If you have that handy, I just want you to kind of pull it up or keep that in the back of your mind as we go over some of these common transferable skills. And if anybody does not have that worksheet or can't find it, please send that to us in the chat, and we'll be sure to send you a link to that as well.
Yes, we have a worksheet transfer. Yep.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat your question?
Yes, I just opened the transferable skills worksheet. Yep.
Perfect, perfect. Yes, and for those of you who are maybe trying to find it, it's the one that's got some green bubbles and lettering on it. But again, I'd like you just to kind of keep that in mind as we look over this list of transferable skills. So we have everything here from verbal, written communication, creativity, critical thinking, customer service, product development. Some of these may be more obvious for the field or the industry that you want to go into. And for those of you on the call who maybe don't want to go into industry at all, but want to stay in an academic setting, I would challenge you, I guess, to go through this list and tell me which of these an employer in the area you're interested in working, which of these an employer could point at and say, no, thank you, I don't want someone who's good at time management. or I would actually pass on someone who says they have great marketing skills. Pretty rare to find. So going for a more standard or broad list like this can really give you kind of a place to start. And as that worksheet indicates, you can go over things that you believe you're already good at. Skills you would think, you know, I'm where I need to be with this. I've really honed in my critical thinking skills and I can articulate this well to an employer. That goes in your done column. Then there's the column of things that still need more work or more improvement. If you've already gotten feedback on things like, I'm gonna pick on you, Olivia. I wish Olivia would have a little bit more independence in her work. She kind of comes back to me and seeks a lot of reassurance. So if that's feedback that she's gotten then before, that could go on the working in and improving upon column, things to kind of be keeping in mind. And then of course, there are the things that you can maybe look at on this list and say, you know what, I don't have that. That's not something that I'm bringing to the table right now. And I need to seek out ways and opportunities to develop that skill. We aren't doing ourselves a just service by saying things like, well, I'm just not good at being creative. It's not a skill that I have. Because truthfully, yes, there are some people that are more skilled in all areas than others, but skills are things that can be developed. That's why they're called skills. They're things that people can do. So having that growth mindset, that understanding of, I may come from a place where I lack in some of these areas, but there's still steps I can take to improve upon those or grow. This again is just a broad list. So if you're looking for something that is more specific to your, again, your industry, the job you want to work in, like Olivia mentioned, looking at a job description is a great way to get some of that feedback on the types of transferable skills that would be helpful for you to work on now, yesterday, tomorrow, and forever. Same thing with, like I mentioned earlier, if you have a employer that you're already connected with, or maybe it's a faculty member in your department who might say, if you're going to be working in this industry, you should really work on XYZ. Seeking out mentorship is also, I mean, it's always been a thing, but I think it's probably becoming a bit more common, or at least we're encouraging more students to engage in mentoring and mentee relationships, because some of these other hands-on experiences that we maybe had been banking on or that we were looking forward to either this summer or in the semesters to come, due to COVID, they may not still be there. So having more of a mentoring relationship where you can still be connected with someone who works in your desired field to learn from, to ask these questions of, and maybe even to get feedback on the skills that you believe you've already honed in and that you think you really excel in, they might be able to confirm if you're in a place where, yes, you can be done working on that, or if it's something that deserves a little more time and attention. What did I miss there, Olivia?
I don't think anything so far. I would just tell all of you these are great to note down. So if you're trying to think, what skills do I have? Take a look at this list and see ones that you think, you know what, I am a great verbal communicator. I often speak up in meetings. I speak up in class. I do all of this. Or maybe you love to write and you're great at writing both your papers, your dissertation, your thesis, your whatever it is. Write these things down and keep track of them, because even if employers are not asking specifically or explicitly for certain skills, they still want them. Like Amanda articulated, that they're not going to say, wow, you're good at verbal communication, I don't want you. That will not happen. Or at least we've never seen that happen in our time working with employers, which has been quite some time. So just confirmation that this is something, Amanda will send this presentation out later, but if you have like the snipping tool and you want to keep track of this or write it down, do that now.
Great, thank you, Olivia. There was also a question that came in the chat about what is the process for seeking out a mentor tactfully. Right now, I'll try to give an abbreviated version because truthfully, I could probably talk on this subject at length for a good hour if anyone would let me. So you can always reach out for a follow-up meeting if you would like to. I'd be happy to do that. But seeking out a mentor tactfully is about just kind of being prepared and being intentional. So it would be inappropriate for me if I weren't working in the Career and Advising Center at NDSU to reach out to Olivia and say, hey, will you be my mentor? They're probably going to be looking for a little bit about what I called the meat and potatoes of your ask. So why is it that I would like to be connected to Olivia? Olivia, I really have a passion and enthusiasm for higher education. And in fact, I've always worked in career services up to this point. I would love to be able to learn from you about how you do your work and how I could possibly get myself well equipped for a future in that industry. So it's all about how you go about asking the question, being prepared and being intentional with your ask. We've also heard of students who maybe reach out and they do so a bit prematurely, where they haven't done the research into the company, and they seek out that individual as a mentor, and then they find out, whoa, that company is nothing what I thought it was, or that person's role doesn't have anything to do with what I'd like to do. I missed. But if you can do the research on the individual via LinkedIn, that's a great way and place to learn about an individual's professional history. And then also looking up some company details as well, company website, their social media pages, perhaps it's on their LinkedIn as a company as well. So we've got some resources on our website, which I apologize if that's just what went into the chat. It is. Olivia and I are on the same page. So we've put together a couple of resources on our website with some tips, tricks, strategies. I encourage you to check those out, but that certainly isn't all there is to it. We're working on developing a bit more because, like I said, this is a conversation we could have at length with anyone interested in seeking out a professional mentoring relationship. But thank you very much for the question. Keep the questions coming. Are there any others right now, Olivia, that you can see? Okay.
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, fantastic. And we'll keep moving if I can, again, figure out these slide transitions. Okay. So why are these skills so important? So now that you've kind of called to mind some of those skills, or maybe jotted down some of those on the worksheet that are areas for growth and improvement, areas you need to start developing, and then the areas you can call done. I keep putting done in quotes because I don't know that I believe there's ever a done. I hope that we all always have positions and opportunities in this world that push us to our best and help with continued growth. But review those lists. Take them into consideration now as you're looking at those industries, those job postings, talking to those mentors and so on. And as Olivia said, keep them fresh, keep them with you as you put together a resume, as you prepare for an interview. Those are things that they will really help the conversation flow organically. And it seems really difficult, but I know when Olivia and I work with an individual who maybe has all their bullet points put together and it says, conducted research on XYZ specimen in such and such laboratory, it's really easy for us to be able to sit back and say, can we sneak in some organization skills in there, or attention to detail, or anything like that? And then it's like the lights come on for the individuals we're working with, that we can easily sprinkle those in. So having those handy along with a master resume or a master CV that's got all your involvements on it, which we talked about that in a recorded workshop earlier this year. So let me know if you're interested in that one. I'd be happy to send that out as well. But keeping those master copies together can really make trying to get into industry or into academic settings a little quicker, or hopefully a little less stressful if you have that inventory or list together ahead of time. Anything else there, Olivia?
Nothing else in the chat there, but I was even just working with a student who we were talking about her CV, and she was telling me that, man, I wish I would have written everything down as it happened because I'm forgetting all of these things that I could have on my CV. So write things down, keep track of them somewhere. It might be LinkedIn, it might just be on a document that you have anywhere. You will not remember everything, and if you do, then I applaud you because I barely remember what I did yesterday.
So on to then some of the very specifics of what we know employers are looking for. So in the Career and Advising Center, we utilize the expertise and the data collected by NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And according to their 2020 report, these attributes that you see listed here have, as you can see by the percentages, overwhelmingly been said that that's what employers are primarily seeking on resumes and seeking for skills in general. So problem-solving skills. I would like to challenge anyone on the call right now to let me know if they have never utilized any problem-solving skills of any kind in their academics, work experience, internships, volunteering, anything like that. Truthfully, I think it's something that we all bring to the table. Again, everyone's at different skill levels and abilities, but we all have this skill. And so if we know that employers are looking for it, taking the time to sit back and ask yourself, where did I demonstrate problem-solving skills best? When can I best articulate my ability to effectively problem solve in my master resume? Where can I see, or my master CV, where can I see that fitting in best? And if it's preparing for an interview, what's a good example of a time when I did problem solving? So this list should be kept close while you do your job search. I know Olivia and I keep it close as we develop presentations and have discussions with organizations, classroom presentations, and even our own student staff. We want them to be able to really work on each of these skills in their roles too, so that when they go into the industry or the workforce, wherever it is they choose to go, they can at least go with this arsenal or this tool belt of all of these different skill sets.
And if you have ever asked yourself, what are employers even looking for? Like, what would get me hired? What skills do they want? How would I get the job? This list is kind of your peek into what employers want to see. So if you've asked that question, then this is kind of an answer, or at least a guide towards getting closer to that goal of employment or a faculty position or a program that you want to get into. These are really great skills to keep at the back of your mind and sometimes the front of your mind.
Definitely.
Excuse me, Amanda. I have a question.
Please.
Like the problem solving skills, it seems to be a very broad term for me. My experience, I have been working in a consultancy firm. I was good in solving technical things, but I found myself not so much good in doing paperwork or some problem in human management. So yeah, problem solving, if you are going to speak problem solving, it can be like how you are managing your team or how you are dealing with problem associated with management like that. You may be good at something technical, like solving an equation, for example, solving repairing a car, something like that, but you might not be good doing something like handling your children, something like that. It's a problem, but not an industry level. So something like that. So I found that thing quite disturbing for me. Like, I'm good in problem solving, but in specific area. So should we seek, when we are looking for a job, should we, keep focus on which industry and which sort of department we are focusing, find a job, and what sort of problems they are going to have? Am I good at solving their problems, or am I just good to solving my own?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Mohammed. I guess I kind of have a mixed answer, which if any of you have ever worked with me before, you know my answers. I usually call them clear as mud. With that, I always want to encourage students and alumni, those that I'm working with, to find jobs that play to their strengths, that are things that they enjoy doing, that they're interested in doing. So with your example of a very technical problem versus managing problems maybe among a team, and those very different, like people-facing problems versus technical, I guess my first question I would want to ask would be, well, what types of problems do you enjoy solving? And does that have to be a central focus of the job? So if you're looking at something that's very technical support focused, that's going to be a lot of technical problem solving. So that's different than if you're starting to apply for jobs where the main focus is managing people, or maybe it's like human resources related, or there's a lot of conflict mediation, and you're trying to say that, well, I know employers are looking for problem solving, so I'm going to apply my technical skill set problem solving to that world of problem solving among management or within management. So that, I guess that's where my answer is clear as mud, because it kind of depends on what it is you're pursuing. And we never want to lie to an employer or embellish just too much to say, if it's like a really technical internship or something you had, to say, very good at problem solving and then not elaborate as to what. That's where your resume or your interview responses should be developed and articulate enough too, where the employer understands where that problem solving strength and skill comes from, what type of involvement.
Well, I agree with you. It's sort of very ideal sort of scenario. But what I have seen, once the employer is going to select you, you have to work there. Then they are going to overload you with multiple assignments. Assignment is not going to be the same. You may, like, I have been working in field. There were some technical problems. Then I worked there for 3 years, switched to an office job. then again switch to field, then again office job. So every time scenario is different. It's not something they know, okay, Muhammad is very good in solving technical things. Maybe sometimes they do not have enough workforce to manage the other people. So Muhammad has to take that position also. So how we are going to deal in this situation when you are forced to do the job you are not good at?
Yeah, so the way it sounds there is that you have an employer who sees that you're effective and that you're working hard, and so they want to kind of pile more on you to say, okay, well, we've got Muhammad here, we maybe don't have more of that workforce that you mentioned, so we're going to keep giving more to this individual, and then all of a sudden you're tasked with duties that you weren't hired to complete, but things that you feel that are outside of your skill set. Is that correct, Mohammed?
A little bit, but I was just, it was difficult for me to explain myself properly. Sometimes employer, maybe it may not happen in US, but in other countries I have seen they utilize you if you are there. So they try to get benefit as much as they want, and they're not going to look at your resume or CV after your interview. So you are just an sort of an kind of a thing they are going to use. So, so they're going to put you in different places, right, Mohammed? Say 6 months you will work with technical team. Yeah, then we are going to teach you some other things like management. They are going to say that we are going to teach you, but actually they are asking you to do that thing also. I have been through this thing. I found myself a little bit, if I try to resist, then they are going to look at you with strange eyes, and maybe after 6 months or 1 year you are not going to find yourself in the same place, or maybe in different company you are forced to switch. So I was thinking about this thing also, because I have been through this awkward situation. So yes, I agree with you. I'm not asking a solution from you, but it's an awkward situation in reality I have been through. So you are in a position, you have to carry on with your job, but you have been forced to do multiple things where your expertise are not being utilized properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I wish I could say that doesn't happen in the US, but it totally does. We find someone who's capable. Oh, go ahead, Olivia.
The way that it's labeled on our position descriptions, Mohammed, is other duties as assigned. And I think that's on everybody's position description, and they can give you any task at any time, and it falls into that category, other duties as assigned. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said, if you're at a company and the work that they're asking you to do is no longer in line with the work that you enjoy doing or that you have the skill set in, that's kind of the time that you roll into a new either position or company, or you talk to a supervisor and say, you know what, these were some of the things that I really enjoyed about my job, and I'm kind of getting these other things tacked on. Can we kind of get back to maybe the roots of that? Or just, it's important to kind of keep communication with the people who are above you and the people who are pulling you through the job that you have. And I think this all really does tie into transferable skills, because these skills from an employer perspective too are transferable to different types of work. So even within the job that you have, like you said, problem solving is a very broad term. There's problem solving with people, there's problem solving with technical things, with presentations, with whatever it is. And they're going to try to use that skill in all those different avenues, because rarely is a job just one thing. And that's why we really want to develop these transferable skills in a lot of different aspects of your life, because it does allow you to do work differently or maybe better than not having these skills at all. And if it's something new that gets added to your plate that you've never done before, you continue to grow and develop in that area. I think a year ago today, I would not be as comfortable in Zoom as I am today. And in the last 5 months, Amanda and I have used Zoom so much that now we're experts and wizards in Zoom. So there are things that we keep developing and growing in, and that is the great thing about transferable skills, is you keep developing them through time. I hope I'm not at the peak point of all these skills that are even on this list today, but I think that does really bring up a good discussion, and kind of brings up workplace happiness, and if you're doing the work that you really want to do. And that's something to keep evaluating when you're at a job. Is this what I want to do? Am I still learning and growing in the ways that I want to? And just keep having that conversation with mentors and also, your employer as well.
Yes, great discussion. Thank you for that, Mohammed, and thank you for your insights. That's, like Olivia said, definitely relevant here, and I think good for everybody on the call to hear too. Any other thoughts or questions on the NACE transferable skills? Otherwise, we'll just keep on trucking, I think. So more of what employers will be looking for. This is some data that was collected from our internship participants here at NDSU. Granted, these are undergraduate internships, and I realize that many of the individuals here on the call are graduate level or beyond, but I think this is still very relevant because this brings up what I would consider a self-awareness piece. So what we can see here is that the data that was collected from those internships, there were surveys that were conducted and questions asked of the employers and the students following the internship. So employers were asked, where do you think this student still needs to develop, or what are some of their weakest categories or weakest skills, as you can see on the table. And then also the students were asked, where do you think you needed to improve most, or where do you think you were doing the best? So they identified that there was the biggest gap, and this is by some of the colleges or some of the different areas that were participating in internship at that time. Some of the biggest gaps were in communication, problem solving, initiative, ability to follow, establish, and achieve priorities, explaining problems and breaking them down into manageable pieces. So these are all things that are transferable skills. These are all things that, as we've identified, they can be developed in many different ways for many different industries or many different types of work. So I think the main message with this is it's very easy to lack self-awareness in these different areas or regarding your skill sets if you're not seeking out feedback. So I think the common trend and the common theme here is feedback and clear communication. So if you're seeking out feedback, even if there aren't formal evaluation processes, treat it not necessarily as formal, but treat it as important, where you're making notes of these things and now going back to compare also to this list of other skills you've written down to really determine where and how you can improve. All right, and then moving right along, you already bring something to the table, but how do you sell it? So some of the best ways to communicate these skills, which I think we've already touched on a little bit, would be using and utilizing examples. So you have that giant list of transferable skills that we had on the slide earlier. Perhaps you found them on a different site you've Googled. However you find it is fine. And now that you have those, like I mentioned with problem solving, sitting back and looking at that master resume or that master CV or just the list of all the things you've ever done and asking yourself, where and how did I best demonstrate this skill? Or kind of related to Mohammed's comment from earlier too, in which context is the most relevant that I demonstrated this problem solving skill? And then making sure you're including that in a resume or that you're prepped with an example for an interview. I don't want to get into interviewing too much, but it's still very relevant. Employers more often than not are asking what we call behavioral based interview questions, where they're going to ask things like, can you give me an example of a time when you did blah, blah, blah? Explain a situation in which you had to effectively communicate. You know, so they're asking these different questions that are about seeking examples, but then seeking examples with a lot of these transferable skills. So calling some of those to mind before an interview can really help you to feel more confident, which is the next bullet point there, and which also got brought up earlier in terms of how and when you know you're effective with a skill or when you need to improve upon a skill. Confidence, however, is what I would call a double-edged sword. Olivia and I have certainly worked with students who have a lot to be confident in, and they come to us and they are the most timid or they are the most concerned with talking about themselves in a positive light because they don't want it to come off as arrogance or they don't want it to come off as entitlement. Truthfully, if you have the skills and you bring them to the table or you get an interview, it's because you have what the employer or the recruiter is looking for, and it's about just delivering the information, giving good sound examples in an interview effectively. The area where it's a double-edged sword is we've also worked with individuals who are far too confident, some of whom are self-aware, some of whom are not. And so also coming off as too confident can seem a bit boastful, or it can be a little off-putting to an employer, a reader of a resume, a recruiter, whomever it is. If it seems like you kind of think, if your confidence comes off in a way that you don't need to be trained, you don't need new information, you've got it all figured out and you can just jump into a job and take off and run with it. That can be a little daunting and concerning to an employer as well. How are communicating with others, the skills that you, I don't think that that makes sense the way that I have that written, so I'm going to try rephrasing it. How are you communicating the skills that you do not yet possess? We have students who will, and individuals we work with will bring this up a lot. They might say, here's this position description. It's talking about, maybe it is, I'm going to keep using the example of problem solving among supervisees. And maybe you've never supervised individuals before, you don't have that experience with that level of problem solving. Students will often ask us, should I go ahead and just put it in the cover letter that I don't know how to do that yet, or I don't have that experience? And I guess the type of feedback or advice that we might give in that area would be, there's no need to draw attention to the things that you do not bring to the table, because the employer may already draw that conclusion themselves, especially if it's something specific like an area of education or a number of years of experience in a certain area. But then also, we don't want them to focus on what we don't bring to the table. We want them to focus on what we do and all the different ways that we know we could be a good fit for that job, that role, that company, and excel. So instead of touching on here the things that I don't have, making sure, again, that you're communicating what the skills that you do have and the value you bring in a professional and articulate way. Thoughts or questions in that area, or additional feedback you have on that one, Olivia?
I would just say, if this is an area that you have particular interest, a lot of times after we've done this workshop, we have met with many of the individuals who have attended just to chat and have a one-on-one conversation of areas that you feel that you're confident in and areas that maybe you're not, or just to see how it is talking about it, because we talk about skills every day. It's easy for us to bring up problem solving and initiative and just kind of use that as part of our vernacular, but that's not the case for everybody, and we don't expect that that's the case for you. So if you just need someone to prompt and probe you with questions to help kind of facilitate a conversation about areas you want to develop or not develop, or if you're being too confident or too arrogant about something, we are happy to provide that type of feedback and just kind of coach you through that type of a conversation as well.
Yes, thank you for adding that, Olivia. So how do you develop the skills that you're lacking? Some of these are going to be more obvious than others, but again, if you're going back to that worksheet or the list that you've maybe made on things that you, skills you still need to develop or things that you need to improve upon, you can do that by way of volunteering, taking on new roles in the classroom, group projects, or research teams. And so this would touch on Mohammed's comment again a little bit, that if you are voluntold that you're going to take on new duties or maybe be pushed into another department, really try to assess it for how and where can I grow, or what is this going to be able to teach me that will be valuable in my next step or the next phase of my career journey. Again, one of the more obvious ones I think is through part-time or full-time employment, which, just as a little plug for that too, we do have our virtual career fairs that are going to be coming up very early this year. They typically happen a little later in the semester, but they're going to start, geez, isn't it the first week of the semester is the part-time jobs fair? And again, those are virtual, so they'll all happen similar to this right now. You'll still go in and register and indicate which employers you want to chat with. And then you schedule a time and then you just kind of go from there. It's not happening in a room or as a group. And then the more specific industries or area career fairs are happening starting September 10th. Health and Life Sciences, Business Studies. Olivia, I think I can see the screen moving and the reflection on your glasses. If you don't mind providing them a link to the virtual fairs page, thank you. So that will be another great place to seek out some of those opportunities to develop new additional skills, or maybe even just to seek employment for once you're finished with your studies. Research, if you're participating in research and grant writing, those are additional ways and places to continuing to develop these skills as well as teaching. And for those on the call who have maybe worked as a TA before, you likely get some of that feedback about content delivery, the quality of the class, or if, you know, what the student's overall impression was. Granted, whenever you get feedback, it could always be in one extreme or another. Really kind of depends on the individual's experience, which that's kind of the point of feedback. But then trying to find that happy medium, or where the more consistent comments and remarks are coming from, to see if there's something that you can improve upon. If it's something like the classroom was too cold or the lighting was weird, that's not necessarily something you had control over. But again, content and then service delivery or delivery methods, certainly. Any thoughts or questions on skill development, I guess, in general?
So I have a question.
Please.
So I'm a PhD student. So sometimes I get struggled with writing. I mean, thoughts will come into many ideas, and then to put them into the paper, you know, sometimes we have a struggle with writing skills. So what is the style that generally used for the dissertation? What, I mean, here when it comes to US standards, what are the different types of writing styles we have?
I do not believe that I'm well equipped to answer that question. How about you, Olivia? Any thoughts or feedback?
If it's specifically for a dissertation, I would talk to your faculty member on what for your particular program is the best way to style and write that. And then the Center for Writers, the Graduate Center for Writers, works a lot with dissertations. But if it's just more about style of writing when it comes to professional work, there's a lot of great ways to practice that right now. So if you're ever emailing faculty or staff on campus, setting up emails where there's a greeting, you introduce yourself, you say and what you're asking for, you have kind of a final closing statement, and you say best regards or thank you or something. Those are small ways that you can start to really utilize those skills right now, because I think emails are a great example of a way that we can see if a person has good written communication skills and if they don't, or if they're providing enough context or if they don't. And I'm sure you've all received emails that don't have enough detail or they aren't very professional, but that I think is an area where writing can get developed quickly, because you are going to send emails regardless this semester, and you're going to send emails in your future work unless for some reason they only communicate in person or via the phone, which that is rare to happen in these days. So
yeah, emails and professional wise, I do have the expertise on placing the contact and details about what we have to communicate. But when it comes to research writing, like, you know, a little bit I need some focus, because it's different. The thoughts will be different, and when you keep on paper, sometimes it may come to excellence, sometimes it may a little bit, come to the level of low representation, where we miss chances, especially when it comes to the research PhD students for research opportunities. As you have mentioned, develop the skills that you are lacking, like grant writing. Yeah, if my grant to get sanctioned, so I should have a very commendable way of writing my idea to propose with a good written communication skills. So what do you suggest? Like, what kind of resources we have to refer for that?
And I would say overall, luckily in a lot of these areas, both grant writing and thesis or dissertation, there are people that can review these documents to kind of give you an idea. But even like as simple as it sounds, Googling and saying what should be included in a thesis, what should be included in a dissertation or a grant or any of that, and reading through examples. We have a lot of examples of types of writing on our site. We don't have a lot of like dissertation or thesis examples because we focus more on the career side of things and what industry is looking for, or any like faculty positions you might apply to. But there are examples in other places, looking through those and kind of seeing where the discrepancies lie, because you still want to use your voice through it, but there are hundreds, thousands, millions of people have done things before you have done them. So if you're able to look back and see ways that you can change or alter what you do, that's helpful. Or even just asking for feedback. when you do something. So asking from your faculty member, asking from anybody and saying, when you read through this, what's missing? Or what type of feedback would you give me? Or what would you like to see to make this better? And really trying to push people to provide that, because not everybody is comfortable providing that type of feedback. Amanda and I do that every day. We provide people with feedback, and we can be very forward with it and still pleasant and polite with it. But some people feel that feedback is a negative, and it's not. It's just a way to grow and develop further. So I know this isn't super specific on how to articulate your thesis or a dissertation, but I would say continue to have other people look at it and ask them for feedback, and try to come up with some pointed questions of, is the layout nice? Am I using the right words? And I know that the Graduate Center for Writers, they really do watch for any issues within writing that are consistent, maybe problems that you have done within your documents, and they want to teach you how to do it differently. So if there is one issue within your writing capabilities, or you're wording something incorrectly multiple times, they'll then teach why that's wrong and why you would do it a different way. So as Amanda and I would love to be the czar of everything, but that's definitely an area we defer to that office more often than not.
Okay. Yep.
And this may not be pertinent to your specific situation, but I would also just encourage anybody to seek additional experiences or additional exposure. So if you are working underneath a faculty member right now and they are working on any grant proposals themselves, not that they can necessarily let you take it all on, but if they could let you kind of take a stab at it or take a try at it yourself and then provide you feedback on what you've put together, then it gives you some actual hands-on applied experience and combines that with an opportunity to get some feedback. Sorry, I was distracted a little bit there. I saw that Mohammed raised his hand though. Mohammed, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was just looking at the list in front of my list screen. So I was wondering, I think you missed one point, that's socializing with SOPs definitely in COVID-19 situation. So yeah, socializing also helps you to understand how to communicate with random people, even you don't know. Maybe it's very good in Americans. I have seen Americans are very good in socializing, but people from other countries, yes, they do find difficulty.
That's great feedback. I've added that to my notes and I can add it to the PowerPoint for next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other? Definitely an area you practice. And I mean, Amanda and I may look like wonderful communicators right now, but I was not always this loud and vocal in my time or presenting or these skills. The more you do it, the easier it becomes and the more comfortable you get doing it. And socializing definitely falls into that category.
Yes, socializing and networking for sure. Thank you. Any other feedback or questions up to this point? Right. So what are you currently involved in that develops these skills? So this is kind of elaborating on the discussion we've already had up to this point, but kind of a challenge for you then is to, just like I said before, look at those skills, see what you need to develop, but even asking yourself, what can I do more, do differently? Could I do in another setting with other people, or revolving around another topic or content? What could I do to kind of expand upon these skills? So that's like what we were just discussing about getting more hands-on involvement with grant writing or research writing, whatever that writing style might be, to then get some feedback and get some hands-on experience with it. So that would be doing differently or doing more potentially. You could also do these things in another setting, back to Mohammed's example from earlier, where there's that problem solving that happens in a very technical way, and then it transferring over onto another, maybe another department or another type of a role in which you would have to do more problem solving person to person. I just saw a question pop up. Are there any volunteer works on campus we can get which involves socializing with people? And it looks like Olivia is already on top of it. Thank you, Olivia. So she's got a link provided there to student activities and where you can learn a little bit more about those opportunities. We also know that more employers are going to be reaching out to our department. Well, at least we're told up to this point. Olivia and I don't do a lot of direct employer relations, but we hear a lot of what's kind of in the works. And more of them are going to be looking for chances to network virtually with our students in the coming semester, year, potentially years. due to COVID, the inability to get together for meals and other networking events, they'll be posting more of those opportunities in CareerLink, which, not to keep you busy, Olivia, but do you mind providing a link to that as well? And so in CareerLink is where you'll find that information on the career fairs that are happening and the employers that are attending, but you'll also find information. For example, Ide Bailey is going to be hosting, I think they're doing a bingo or another kind of a networking event where they'll just kind of have all those folks who are interested in their company and the types of roles that they hire for. They're kind of getting them all together for a virtual event instead of the in-person.
And the link that I put for the volunteer network with student activities in the union, they always have an open or a ongoing added to Google document that shows all the different volunteer opportunities that are happening within the Fargo-Moorhead community and on campus. And that gets updated daily, if not weekly. It just basically is on a rolling basis of whenever opportunities come up. But those are things you can find the information about how to volunteer, and that's always engaging with other people and doing work and engaging with the community or even campus. So take a look at that, keep that kind of just in your Rolodex of opportunities to get out there and engage. But yes, CareerLink is going to have a lot of opportunities for networking. And on our site too, there's a lot more information about networking and tips. And I put in the chat as well our networking log that Amanda has put together to keep track of networking conversations that you have and maybe what you learned from those people and how things went well or if they didn't go so well, so you can keep improving and sharpening those skills.
Thank you, Olivia. And then a couple of more of those just kind of prompting questions to help you to do some goal setting or goal planning in terms of skill development or skill polishing, whatever we want to call it, is what can you change today to help you to maximize your current opportunity? So I think often enough we work with individuals who might be a little disgruntled in the role, or they feel like they're kind of capped, like, nope, not developing any new skills in this role because I've done everything that I can. But really try to push yourself to a place where you can seek out those opportunities in other departments, other areas with other individuals that can really help you to still grow and expand upon what you already bring to the table. And then the next point, who could you start networking with to learn more about the skills that you should be developing? That networking might happen with a conversation with Olivia and myself. Maybe that's a place to start. However, if you feel like you're pretty well aware of the industry or the individuals that you should be networking with, reaching out to them. I know for a lot of people it feels a little uncomfortable to do kind of a cold call outreach to see if you can connect with someone or if they could be a mentor or perhaps if they have any networking events coming up with their company. But it is far more common than you may even realize. And you know, websites like or social media platforms like LinkedIn, that's exactly what they're designated for. It's to help you to establish an online network of like-minded professionals in an industry or a career that you're interested in. And did I see, oh, go ahead, yeah, Mohammed.
Sorry. So yeah, for the last statement, who could you start networking to learn more about skills you should be developing? Like for this point, I have a little bit more to add. Like it doesn't matter if you want to be in industry or in your own field or in academia, because I have seen, that's my personal experience, people from different, sometimes if someone is working in HR, he can just tell you or he can guide you, okay, there's a position or this guy is perfect to talk, or there is, if I'm from civil engineering, I may have friends from mechanical, electrical. Nowadays, the discipline, like different technologies, they are just working together. So there are possibilities you may find a better position in different departments. Maybe you are going to switch your field, or maybe you are going to quit engineering and you are going to work with something very different. So yeah, I think this statement is a little bit congested for, if you look at today's time, like the era in which we are living now. Maybe that was perfect if you just see 20 years ago how situation was there, because things were not so much developed. We do not have social networks. There was no concept of artificial intelligence. Now everything is being digitized. So yeah, so I think now we need to broaden our this sort of network also with different people in different fields. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very good feedback and a very good addition there. And that's why we kind of struggle as an office, I think, sometimes when we try to encourage students or alumni, those that we're working with, to attend various different career fairs, right? Because like for one that we have coming up, for example, is labeled as business studies. So someone who could look at that and say, well, business studies, I'm not really actually in the College of Business, so there's nothing that's going to be there for me, or there's no networking that can happen there. But look at all the different companies that may still go to an event like that within the area of business studies, and they hire someone in completely different areas or in completely different, what people would maybe categorize as like career communities or different types of jobs, but it all has so much overlap. But that you're right, that I think that used to be much more of the mentality that this degree equaled this type of a job. But truthfully, the way of the world now is that this degree over here could actually equal a plethora of different jobs all around over here. So yeah, very great insight. Thank you for sharing that. Accidentally muted myself. So then once you've got it, how do you sell it? So once you've got those skills, how are they coming across effectively to employers, or again, with confidence to employers? That can happen by way of resumes, cover letters, which we haven't really touched on too much yet. But those cover letters, they should typically accompany a resume or a CV. Not a lot of repeat information from a cover letter to a resume or a CV, but that's for another workshop or another tutorial. Those will come through in interviews. During elevator pitches or at networking events, you'll likely have a chance to kind of talk a little bit about where you come from with an academic background, from a career standpoint, some of those skills that you are bringing to the table, and why that employer at a networking event would want to know. And interviewing was apparently so important that I included it twice. So that's how you know you're really going to sell your skills in an interview. Thoughts or questions up to this point? I see we've got something in the chat here. Okay, looks like we're good to move on then. So more of this is just kind of action step planning, things that you can do next. So putting together SMART goals, we've already talked about some of those prompts that can kind of help you to identify and establish what those goals will be or what they will look like. You can also attend those employer presentations, which we're not having as much of those employer presentations on campus. And in fact, I don't think we're having any on campus this fall, but a lot of those will still happen, like I mentioned, by way of virtual engagement, and those can be found on CareerLink as well. At those networking events, and just using those chances when you are coming across employers from your industry to ask them about the types of skills that they're really looking for, or maybe what are the common skills are that are potentially lacking from, or that they're seeing as being insufficient in more of their recent hires. And oh my goodness, sorry about that. I clicked my slide on accident. You can also visit with our staff to discuss elevator pitch, networking preparation, working on that LinkedIn profile, working on any of the documents we've talked about up to this point, because that's exactly what we're here for. We're here to be a support wherever it is you all are coming from, at whatever stage in this journey that you're in. And then as a reminder, even at 5 years after you've completed your degree and you've moved on from NDSU, we are still here to be a resource. Again, at least 5 years after you've graduated, and the services that we provide are free of charge to you at that time as well. So with that, I know it's 1:01, so I went a minute over, and I do apologize, but I would welcome anyone to stay on the call if they have any questions or would like to put any questions in the chat, and I will hang out and answer any that come up. Otherwise, thank you all so much for your time and participation.